Okay, so I want to move on now to talking about the second domain of mastery, which is skills mastery, which is mastery of a particular talent that you have. And this is actually the kind of mastery that we immediately think of. We don't really think of personal mastery when the topic of mastery comes up. When we think of the term mastery, we're really thinking about talent mastery. We're thinking of skills mastery, being a very good programmer, for example, being a very good researcher or a teacher in my domain. So I want to give you a little bit of a background about skills mastery before I get into measurement of it. Okay, so this is the background. The gentleman on the left is actually a gentleman that I talked about earlier. His name is Viktor Frankl. He wrote this book called Man's Search for Meaning. I already gave you some background about him, that he was incarcerated. I think he was in Auschwitz, actually, in the concentration camp. And his big thesis was that the secret to leading a happy life is to have meaning in your life. That is to contribute to something bigger than yourself. Not really worry about your own problems, but to really think about other people's problems. And we're going to discuss this idea a little bit later too, and why he was right. His thesis, he called it logo therapy. Logo means meaning, therapy means therapy, of course, and so meaning therapy. So trying to help people figure out why do they exist on this earth? What really makes meaning to them? How do they want to contribute to society, and so on. And he, of course, wrote his book, actually started writing his book before he was put in the concentration camp, but finished it. It released in 1946. And as I mentioned some time back, it was one of the top 100 books, according to Time magazine, in the 20th century. This gentleman on the right, he's a Hungarian gentleman. His name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And he went to the US in 1940s, maybe early 1950s, actually, when he was a teenager. And he came across Man's Search for Meaning, and he decided later on to actually put this thesis to a test. Is it really true that people need meaning in order to be happy? So to test this hypothesis, he conducted a series of very, very interesting studies. In one of these studies, which had about 800 participants, huge study conducted in the early 80s, he gave two things to participants in the study. He gave them a journal to carry around with them, and also gave them a beeper. Okay? You guys remember beepers? This was well before cell phones. Okay? All right, so he gave them these two things, and he programmed these beepers to sound an alarm at random times during a whole week. And what the participant had to do when the beeper went off is take their journal and write in it what happened, what was happening at that point when the beeper went off, and how happy they were. Okay? So 800 participants, all with beepers, all with journals, and the beepers going off 8 times during the day for one whole week. So 56 data points. Some of the people did not fill in the journal sometimes because they were sleeping or whatever. But anyway, he had a lot of data from 800 participants. And these participants were from very, very different backgrounds. Some of them were business people, some of them were artists, some of them were even just bums on the streets. Really, no work to do, nothing, just begging, etc. So he had a lot of variety of people. And he wanted to find out if Viktor Frankl is right. That is, that you need meaning in order to be happy. And if it's true, then it should be true for everybody. Because according to Frankl, that is basic human nature, to seek meaning. Okay, so he got all these journals back and he looked over them, and he identified those situations where people said, I'm feeling really, really happy. And he looked at what they described. Okay, so for example, if you're a participant in that study and the beeper went off right now, you would take out your journal and you would write in it, I'm attending Raj's lecture with my big family and I'm super happy, right? Or something like that. Okay, now he took back all these journals and he looked at what was common to these experiences that people reported when they said they were really happy. And he coined this term flow to refer to this common theme in the experiences in which people reported a high level of happiness. Now, you might have come across this term because of Csikszentmihalyi. He's actually become very, very popular. He's one of those academics that has really become a celebrity in the mass market as well, not just among academics, but even in the mass market. Okay, so he found 6 common features to flow experiences. I'm going to talk about 3 because these 3, I think, are the most representative of flow experiences. And after I talk about them, I'm sure that you'll be able to reflect on whether you've had flow experiences in your life. And my bet is that every single one of you in this room has had a flow experience. Okay? And I can also bet that when I describe flow experiences, you'll recognize that this is a very special experience. This is almost a spiritual experience, a mystical experience. But nevertheless, everybody's experienced it. Okay, all right, the very first feature of flow, represented by the picture on the top, is what Csikszentmihalyi called a paradoxical perception of time. That is, time both seems to slow down during flow experiences and at the same time somehow speed up. So let me give you a specific example. Imagine that you get into flow when you're playing a game of tennis and you're hitting the ball. It might seem as if the whole game is now slowed down a little bit. It's happening in slow motion. The ball is approaching towards you a little bit bigger because you're able to see everything more clearly. Maybe you can even see the fur on the ball, right, as you hit it across the net. And so things seem to have slowed down. And yet, when that flow experience is over and you look at your watch, what? 3 hours passed by. I even forgot to have my lunch. How did this happen? Okay, so that is the beauty of flow experiences, is that time has this paradoxical you have a paradoxical perception of time. The second feature of flow is this picture here, which is an intense focus on a kind of moment-to-moment basis on whatever is going on right now. So your mind is not distracted by things that happened in the past. It's not predicting things that are going to happen in the future. You're very much focused on what's happening right now. So if you have an undivided attention on things that are happening right now, it's obvious that the things that are happening right now are going to be a little bit bigger. They're going to be a little bit more experiential. They're going to have a bigger impact on you. So for example, if you get into flow when climbing up a mountain, for example, rock face, you're a mountaineer, right? Let's imagine. And you're climbing up this mountain. I know that there's a Belgian mountaineer who has not been found for 10 days or so. I feel sorry about that. But imagine in this scenario, you get into flow. You would not think about, okay, what did I have for breakfast? Or, what am I going to do after I finish this mountain climbing? Maybe you're going to meet a friend who's going to drive up to the summit and you're going to have a lunch with him or something. You would very much be focused on, okay, is this the next shrub? And it wouldn't be a thought. It would be an action. It would be an experience. It would be non-verbal. And you'd very much be living in a moving window, moment to moment, sub-goal by sub-goal, trying to tackle whatever is needed to be tackled right now. Okay? So you might wonder whether your palms are too cold or wet, and whether they need to be powdered, or whether this ledge is the next ledge, whether the shrub is strong enough to hold your weight, and so on and so forth. Okay, so very intense focus on a moment-to-moment basis on whatever is going on. The last feature of flow, and by the way, I picked up all these pictures from Google, and I would type a keyword, and whatever picture came up, I would take it. And I typed a keyword, not self-conscious, not self-conscious. And this is the picture that came up. Actually, she seems to be self-conscious. So you should have a big X on the top of it, representing not self-conscious. What Csikszentmihalyi meant by not self-conscious was something very, very specific. Usually, most of our life is characterized by what is called mental chatter. Mental chatter. This is the voice in the back of our head which is commenting on how well or how poorly we're doing something. Some people have a lot of mental chatter, some people have very little mental chatter. If you're a particularly rational person, I know that some other people lifted their hands when I put that up, you're more likely to have more mental chatter. You're constantly wondering, is there a better way to do things? And that means that you're probably constantly evaluating how well you're doing things. Okay, so in flow experiences, the mental chatter is minimized, probably gone altogether. Okay, there is no voice in the back of my head when I'm in flow evaluating how I'm doing whatever it is that I'm doing, if I'm teaching, how I'm teaching, and so on. Okay, and there is a very important reason why this mental chatter is gone, and to understand that I have to describe to you the fourth feature of flow. This has to do with when does flow experience happen. It turns out flow experiences happen when there is a more or less full equal match between amount of ability that you have for the task, which is called available ability, and the amount of ability that's required by you by the task, which is called required ability. And really it's in this 45-degree angle that flow experiences happen. In fact, even a perfect match of required and available ability may not guarantee flow. Flow is more likely when the amount of ability required of you is a little bit greater than the amount of ability that you have. So imagine that in tennis you're a 4.5 player and you're playing against somebody who's a 5.0, right? Or maybe 4.6, closer, just above you. You're more likely to get into flow. Okay? Why is that? Why is this flow experience more likely when you're playing against somebody who's just a little bit higher than you? For example, you're playing chess on the computer. If you choose a level that's just a little bit higher than you, you're more likely to lose track of time. You're more likely to be really focused. You're more likely to not be self-conscious and so on. Because when you're in a situation where you have to encounter somebody who's a little bit better than you, you have to rely on not just your past experiences. You have to grow and learn and be better than yourself. You have to stretch as you're doing the activity, and that completely absorbs you in the activity. And that's why you don't have the mental chatter, because you can't afford to have even a little bit of your brain occupied by something else, by the mental chatter. You need all of your brain, all of your capacity to be fully engrossed in this task in order to meet the objective, in order to overcome the obstacle. And that's what makes flow experiences so valuable for us, because we are learning and growing and becoming better while we are doing something. And this really speaks to this mastery that I talked about, right? So we all seem to have a huge desire for mastery. This is not just human beings, even animals have it, rats have it. There was a series of experiments done by a guy called Berline back in the 1970s, where he placed a rat at the entrance to a maze. At the other end of the maze was a piece of cheese, okay? And he saw what happened to the rats when they got to the cheese. And they were very, very happy when they solved the maze and they got the cheese, they got their reward. But after the 100th time, 200th time of going the same route through the maze to get the cheese, they were no longer so happy. Then they started doing something really incredible. They started looking for a new route to the cheese. Okay, they're bored. They're getting the cheese every time by going down the same route. So they started exploring a new route. And when they found a new route, they got really excited. Okay, the whiskers started kind of twiddling and they started shrieking. They were really, really happy. Okay, they gave a high five. No, not quite. Anyway, so they were really, really showing this sign that human beings are very aware. When we solve a puzzle for the first time, we get really excited. We feel really happy. You remember Archimedes, right? He went onto the streets naked, shouting "Eureka" because he had solved a puzzle. Okay, the same phenomenon was observed with the rats. So it's not just human beings. All animals too have this desire to learn, desire to grow, desire to become more effective in their jobs and so on. And Berline called it arousal jag. He referred to this excitement that we have when we learn something new as arousal jag, and that is very, very critical for mastery, and it's connected with flow. Okay, so let me talk to you a little bit about why flow is so important for happiness. For one reason is that it is so critical for enjoyment, for enjoying the present moment. As Csikszentmihalyi found, the experiences around the world, by the way, not just in the US, he's done these studies around the world, the experiences that people rate as being the most meaningful, most happiness-inducing are flow experiences. Second reason has to do with how other people treat you. This is actually a picture of somebody called Susan Boyle, who won Britain's Got Talent in 2009, okay? And she came onto stage and everybody was booing her because she doesn't look that great, okay? And people have this what's called the halo effect, right? Which is if somebody looks good, then they think that this person must be talented and they applaud. If somebody doesn't look good, then they have an instinctive judgment that they're not going to be very good. But anyway, she comes on stage and she blows people's minds. She's so good, she gets into flow. And then after that, all of them stand up and they give her a standing ovation, right? So what that shows you is that people love people who love what they do. Okay, if you love what you do, if you love what you do for work, other people are going to like you a lot. They're going to find you charismatic. But if you chase money, if you chase fame, if you chase all these extrinsic rewards of control and so on, people don't like you as much. So very, very important to remember. This is another reason why flow is such a big determinant of happiness, is because other people like you more when you exhibit flow. The final reason, this is the most important one for us, is that, and this has been documented by a lot of people, including a guy called Anders Ericsson in a really excellent book called Peak, that if you string together 10,000 hours of flow, you have no option but to be a master of the domain. This is very important. 10,000 hours of flow will get you to mastery of a skill. Below 10,000, probably not. Above 10,000, maybe even better chance of being a master. But this 10,000 hours seems to be critical. Now, there are some domains in which more than 10,000 hours is required, because Mastery itself is not one set point. It depends on what are the current levels, right, of how people are performing in that domain. But 10,000 hours seems to be a good rule of thumb to use to figure out how much time you need to devote to a field in order to become a master. And why is it the fact that you become a master of a domain when you string together 10,000 hours? Because if you think back on what leads to flow, it's when the amount of ability required of you is just above amount of ability you have. So every one of those 10,000 hours, you're growing and you're growing and you're growing. And so at the end of the 10,000 hours, you are capable of experiencing what's called high flow moments. These low flow moments happen when you're a beginner and you're against a beginner in tennis, for example. You hit the net or you hit outside and then you have to go pick up the ball, which is boring. But once you get into high flow, Djokovic playing against Federer, then in those flow moments, not only are the players in flow, even the audience gets into flow. That's how powerful they are. And as Anders Ericsson puts it, if you have identified your high flow in life, then you've answered a very, very important question in life, which is, what is my purpose in life? Not what is the purpose of life. That is a different question. That's a philosophical question. Forget that. But what is my purpose in life? And if you have answered that question, you've solved such a big part of your jigsaw puzzle of happiness. Okay? So that is what flow has to do with mastery.